This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
Thanks for coming along this afternoon. My name is Catherine Davis. I'm the Director of the Institute of Modern Languages Research. And it's a great pleasure for us to host the Malcolm Bowie Memorial Lecture here this year. And I'm just going to say a few words about Malcolm and the lecture, and then hand over to Bill Marshall. Malcolm Bowie was one of Britain's most distinguished scholars of French literature, as I'm sure you all know, and you will be familiar with his stellar record of publications from the early Mallarmé and the Art of Being Difficult in 1978 to Freud, Proust and Lacan, 1987, Lacan, the book Lacan in 1991, Psychoanalysis and the Future of Theory in 1994, and Proust Among the Stars, 1998, which won the 2001 Truman Capote Award for Literary Criticism. Malcolm taught at Clare College, Cambridge in the early 1970s, at Queen Mary, London until 1992, and All Souls College, Oxford until 2002. In 2002 he was elected Master of Christ College, Cambridge until 2006. While he was in London, Malcolm was the founding director of the Institute of Romance Studies in 1989, which was later merged with the Institute of Germanic Studies. Both institutes provide the foundations of today's Institute of Modern Languages Research, University of London. Malcolm was also a Fellow of the British Academy and of the Royal Society of Literature, an honorary member of the MLA in the United States, and an Officier dans l'Ordre des Palmes Académiques. He served as President of the Society for French Studies, the British Comparative Literature Association, and the Association of University Professors of French, and he held a visiting professorship at the University of California in Berkeley and the CUNY Graduate Center in New York. So the Malcolm Bowie Memorial Lecture honors the memory of this distinguished scholar who died in 2007. It's hosted biennially by the IMLR and Queen Mary, University of London, and this year is supported by the university's Casal Fund. The Casal Fund, in turn, was set up in 1934 in memory of Charles Casal, former professor of French at the UCL. And this year, the Malcolm Bowie Memorial Lecture will be given by another distinguished academic, who is Tom Conley. And now I'm going to hand over to Bill to introduce Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. This wasn't exactly the last act that I performed during my 3 years as director of the IMLR, but it's been one piece of unfinished business, and I'm absolutely delighted to be participating in it and to be introducing Tom Conley. The story of it is that about a year ago, having discovered they had vast reserves, the Society for French Studies initiated a series of creative schemes, including a visiting international fellowship, from Tom Conley is the inaugural performer. It didn't take me long to think of Tom as a extremely suitable and outstanding candidate for such an inaugural fellowship. His research ranges from the early modern to studies of contemporary cinema, both French cinema and Hollywood cinema. As I give you some titles of his published books: Film Hieroglyphs, 1991, a new edition 2006, The Graphic Unconscious in Early Modern Writing, 1992, The Self-Made Map, Cartographic Writing in Early Modern France, 1996, new edition 2010, L'Inconscient graphique, Essai sur la lettre à la Renaissance, 2000, Cartographic Cinema, 2007, An Errant Eye, Topography and Poetry in Early Modern France, 2011, and À Fleur de Page, Voir et lire le texte de la Renaissance, 2014. He is also a prolific translator. He translated, among others, Michel de Certeau, and Gilles Deleuze. So the fields across which he ranges, early modern studies, poetry, cartography, and cinema, are ones which enrich all of his work. I have to say that as well as his achievements in writing and research, I have always particularly enjoyed the way his writing also contains, here and there, evidence of what we all need, which is a robust skepticism about the discipline in which we work. So I just briefly quote from an article from 1996, where Tom critiques the structures of filiation that contour a certain version of the French nation, which he traces back to Descartes and the conception of space in Descartes. So the structures of filiation that also contour what happens in the classroom, in that the standards of perfect French require speakers to become Oedipalized in their relation to the idiom. There ensues, he writes, the articulation of a closed, depoliticized, boundless space in which the classroom becomes the hothouse of a family romance that takes pride in insulating itself from world-scale dilemmas that know none of the refinements of received French, unquote. It's been a great delight to participate in the hosting of Tom Conley over the past couple of weeks. He's done gigs at Oxford, Liverpool, and Stirling. And I'd like to introduce him today. As you see, the title encapsulates his wide interests, a Baroque event from Deleuze to Montaigne.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Catherine. It's an absolute delight to be here, and all the more in the memory, the shadow of Malcolm Bowie. I never met Malcolm in person, but I must admit right here that he actually jump-started my life. I was really in I felt as if I was in an academic trash can in about 1990, 91, and I sent him this manuscript called The Graphic Unconscious, and actually he, contrary to everyone else who knew, he found it very interesting, and in fact he got it published, and in fact it absolutely changed my look on the world and gave me confidence that I had not had for a long time. And then further, in reading the Freud, Proust, and Lacan, I was just thrown topsy-turvy with delight, in which in those pages when he says that you read too much of Conley and not enough of Albertine Disparu, because in effect the difficult parts of the novel are the best parts, not the ones that are taught mechanically. And so that was one point. And then I invite everyone to go back over his Lacan, which in effect is the finest single reading of Lacan that I know, because it knows French. And again, how many Lacanians have we met who in fact can't, and they haven't Oedipalized their French enough because they don't know a word of it, and they think that they know everything goes into this sort of this conceptual empyrean, and Malcolm brought us back into the pleasure of the language and the way that Lacan thinks in such a dynamic way. I hope I could follow in his path here this afternoon with some words that will, I hope he will listen to wherever he is now. So it could be said that in the essay of Montaigne, readers encounter the famous occurrence Montaigne recounts the fall from his horse qualifies as an event of an event. The very reading of the passage, concluding the 1588 editions of the essay, the chapter de l'exercitation, opens onto the world of the essays at large, conferring shape, form, vision upon the chaotic mass that Montaigne describes relentlessly from one end of the work to the other as, and I quote, une galimafrette, a mixed bag, un fagotage de diverses pièces, a bundle of diverse pieces, un flux caquet, flow of chatter, embrouilleur, confusion, excrément de vieil esprit, tantôt dur, tantôt lâche, mais toujours indigeste, excrements of an old mind, sometimes hard, soft sometimes, but always undigested, pastissage de lieu commun, a pudding of commonplaces, a fricassé que je barbouille ici, fricassé that I'm slapping together, and so on. So the parabolic episode in 2.6 in the L'exercitation becomes the site of the birth of the self-portrait that, if I may, eventually gets realized through writing. So a fulcrum or a plot point of the essays, the account of the fall and what Montaigne makes of it, indicate how experience takes place through the give and take of perception and language. Now, in a strong sense, through repeated and obsessive inquiry into the nature of an event, through philosophy, film, painting, and literature, Gilles Deleuze underscores quite closely what Montaigne essays in the very texture of writing. So what follows, excuse me, the intention is not to find sources, antecedents, or precursors to Deleuze's meticulous, flickering, often elusive reflections on events. Rather, one aim is to develop a sense of relation, a concomitance by which the one informs the other, and, as in color field painting, bleeds into the other. So another, this hope will be to see how the convergence and the overlapping of Deleuze and Montaigne may reveal much about what and how we make and experience contemporary arts and the media that convey them. So, the L'Exercitation comes on the heels of De la Conscience, 2.5, there's the end on that slide, a premonitory essay on the nature of an event that ends with the anecdote culled from the author's own terroir, recounting how a troop belonging to an army ravaging the countryside, the context can only be that of the wars of religion, the setting at the beginning of the chapter, how a troop stole porridge that an indigent mother was preparing to feed her children. She brings a complaint and accusation to the commander, who warns her that she will be put to death if the accusation is false. Then, dangerously, he uses trial and error to get at the truth, ordering a subaltern to cut open the troop's belly. Thus the essay ends. Et la femme se trouva avoir raison, condamnation instructive. De L'Exercitation begins by noting that however much we prepare ourselves to confront the rigor of fortune, be it in war, famine, hard labor, death resists preemptive rehearsal, obviously, because nous ne la pouvons essayer qu'une fois. We can only try it once. To which Montaigne gives the lie in the presence of the printed essay that brings death into the nearest proximity of those, like himself, will try it through the practice of reading in a mode of writing, what Julien Gracq called en lisant, en écrivant, in reading in writing. From this threshold, he tells the parable of his own brush with death. During the same wars of religion, the exact moment of which remains hazy, even confused in the locale in which it takes place. Pendant nos troisième troubles, ou deuxième, il ne me souvient pas bien de cela, étant allé un jour promener à un lieu de chez moi, qui suis assis dans le noyau de tout le trouble des guerres civiles de France, during the third or the second phase of our wars, it's hard really to tell which one, having one day gone for a ride, and then, unquote, mounted on a tame horse, all of a sudden a powerful stud overtakes him. Struck, and he and his horse are thrown upside down. He falls, his face is lacerated, he's on the ground, he lay unconscious, immobile, as he says, 10 paces, 10 pas au-delà from his horse and the scatter of his sword and belt. So after several attempts to revive him, après avoir essayé par tous les moyens de me faire revenir, me tenant pour mort, after having tried every ways to get him back, people taking him for dead, those of his cohort carry him back to the chateau, where, after vomiting a bucket full of blood, he slowly regains consciousness before imagining what might have happened. Pain slowly mollifies, and then cerebral softness lulls him to sleep. Now, not long after a sensation of sleepy beatitude gives way to pain, so insufferable that he feels himself dying over and again. So it's only the next day, does memory return enough, and the verb here is s'entrouvrir, let's see if I'm there, yeah, there's the s'entrouvrir, is right up in the middle there. The verb recalling the action on the troop's belly at the end of de la conscience to represent to him the state in which he had been when perceiving the mightier horse galloping toward him from behind. Now he recalls remembering that when he saw the horse barreling at him, he took himself to be dead. And in the account, a parenthesis opens, we see it here, in which, relating the episode, another voice or thought intervenes. Ce pansement avait été si soudain que la peur n'eut loisir de s'y engendrer. This thought had been so sudden that fear hadn't had time enough either to come forward. Then, before he finds a figure adequate enough to describe what could not be put in words. Il me sembla que c'était un éclair qui me frappait l'âme de secousse et que je revenais de l'autre monde. It seemed to me it was a thunderbolt that struck my soul and with a thud, and that I was coming back from the other world. Then he summarizes the encounter with emphasis on the fact that what happened, despite its commonplace or its even innocuous character, was indeed an event. Now here, I'd love to show this page because this is the exemplaire de Bordeaux that's been beautifully digitized on the Montaigne project, and you see how he really gets going after this. This is a moment that obsesses him. He starts with the story of the event, he ends the essay, and then this long allongé or extension is added. But he says, so we can get in close, ce conte d'un événement si léger est assez vain, n'était l'instruction que j'en ai tirée pour moi, car, à la vérité, pour s'apprivoiser à la mort, je trouve qu'il n'y a que de s'en avoisiner. Or, comme dit Pline, chacun est à soi-même une très bonne discipline, pourvu qu'il ait la suffisance de ses pieds de près. Ce n'est pas ici ma doctrine, c'est mon étude. Ce n'est pas la leçon d'autrui, c'est la mienne. Again, there is the translation that I've essayed here. Read it after the French reading. But it's at this moment where the essay ends, as we've seen, in the editions printed during the author's lifetime. So this copious annotation that goes on two sides of the page, an allongé that counts among the longest and the fullest written into the margins of the Exemplaire de Bordeaux, a commentary on the event, appears in printed form in the posthumous edition from 1595 and afterwards. So prior to that, to the edition, in this passage, what Montaigne reported to be gravely an excruciating moment, his stomach stuffed with clotted blood, he says, his soft impressions of languor and an extreme weakness, giving way to pain that shook him into conscious reflection on how he was felt, is suddenly alleviated in its telling, and in the discovery of a purpose. The narrative becomes the event of its own writing, which is made clear in the drift and flow of the words that follow. Let's see if they're here. No, let's take it back. S'apprivoiser à la mort, to habituate, domesticate oneself in view of death, rhymes with and is contiguous to s'avoisiner, to put oneself in its spatial proximity, such that the allusion to Pline, the name of the author, eager and erstwhile editors of critical editions, footnote with reference to the Historia Naturalis, book 22, line 34, resembles and draws these editors, Montaigne threw a curveball at them, as it were, pardon my baseball vocabulary, resembles and draws near to sa voisine, as it were, discipline, discipline here becoming discipline. What here says Pliny. So the event is not what was past, or an allusion to a book on the shelf in Montaigne's library, but what happens in an articulation showing how perception precedes or even exceeds representation. So folding upon each other, the inner emotion of the experience related in the meaning either follows or flickers spontaneously with the sensory effects of the visible surface of the printed description projects upon the eyes, our eyes, gazing at the words and their spacings. Now, that's what seems to spur this long addition, seemingly transcribed without hesitation or emendation in a single draft. So upon praising the virtue to s'épier du près, to spy upon oneself closely, that he claims to be his single and sole study, effectively what will be the project of the experience of the essays, Montaigne praises for having tested or examined death to writing as only 2 or 3 avatars in antiquity had done. In a sentence scribbled in the margins of the page, we can now see and read in this handsome digital format generates perception of the way the words practically embody what could be the harrowing enterprise of self-study. So a vaguely dorsal or spinal figure that would be in books of dissection by Charles Etienne or Vesalius is confused with what went with auto-espionage, what it is to s'épier de près. And so then, here it is, c'est une épineuse entreprise, et puisqu'il me semble de suivre une allure aussi vagabonde que celle de notre esprit, de pénétrer les profondeurs opaques de ses replis internes, de choisir et arrêter tant de menuiseries et ses agitations. Et c'est un amusement nouveau et extraordinaire qui nous retire des occupations communes du monde, oui, et des plus recommandées. And I put the translation there below for us. So at the foot of the letter, the épineuse entreprise anticipates the fugacity of the esprit that resists capture at the very moment the writing announces that it will descend into the darker depths of its inner folds, these replis internes, a formula hemming to, by virtue of anagram, esprit into the fabric of its sonorous and graphic form. Surely, the autopsy that follows, in which Montaigne notes that he had announced in the preface, Je suis la matière même de mon livre, I am the matter of my book, he exhibits himself entirely a skeletos, where in a single view veins, muscles, tendons appear, each piece in its place, or in its seat. The dissection cues on the optical faculty that grasps at once the bodily object being described and the printed impressions that tend at once to capture, diffuse, or disseminate the molecular matter, ink and paper included, comprising the soul. The bleeding of the fluid lines into the paper on the page of the Bordeaux copy takes part in this process at once, I'm going to say, prehending or grasping, apprendre, c'est apprendre à mourir, grasping esprit in its form while releasing and dispersing it all over the surface of the page. Now, in the setting of civil strife, these guerres intestines, intestinal wars in which the essay is written, this moment would seem to be a prise de conscience, a call to a mission of creating events, and what it will do in meshing the experience of the writing self of the book to the project of its portraiture, a durative event whose cognition requires coordination of reading and seeing. Now already in the manner of the matter, remember in 3.8, Montaigne said, car nous sommes sur la manière et non la matière du dire, we're on the manner and not the matter of speech, that he recommends that we heed the dynamics of all communication. It's what Malcolm Bowie was always doing. He was looking at the manière, ou donc la matière du dire. And it's shown in the flow and meander of reflection backwards and forwards across the borders of this chapter and others. Borders in Montaigne which all tend to be membranes and never barriers or walls. That preceding essay, De la Conscience, the philosophe of the 18th century, marshaled to condemn the practice of torture, carries the aphorism, quiconque attend la peine, la souffre, et quiconque la mérité, l'attend. Whoever expects pain, suffers it, and whoever has it has merited it, awaits it. Conscience, anticipating infliction, prehends it through myriad perceptions arising from within and outside of the sentient body. Now, in the following chapter, as if bleeding conscience into with practice, Montaigne now notes how, in what might have been a millisecond, en instant que j'avais perçu le cheval fondant sur moi, his thought in anticipation of the fall was so immediate that, I quote again, fear did not have the leisure of then being begotten. Now, it's here, yes, it's here, it's here where it's obvious that the essay and the effect, or la cause et la chose, are consubstantial, especially in the visual play of the formula in the typography of the essay that sums up his description of what happened. Or, à présent, je l'ai essayé par effet. Je ne fais nul doute que j'en ai bien jugé jusqu'à cette heure. Explanation of the conflation of cause and consequence is found early on in Le Pli, Leibniz et le Baroque, where Gilles Deleuze engages or even fashions event theory to inform what one of his favorite philosophers had called sufficient reason. At the outset, an event is called what happens to a thing, chose, regardless of its own making. And when discerned, it's seen and read in a single and same perception. What we see on it is what we read in its concept or reason. So as a result, the subject, and that subject can be either a sentient being or, more prosaically, a nominative particle of a sentence, is imbricated in the predicate, a force of action, say verb, and vice versa, which becomes for Deleuze the Leibnizian concept of the conception of the event, a quote there, unquote. The Stoics, philosophers high on Montaigne's reading list, from whom Leibniz developed his train of thought, excuse me, saw in propositions or sentences a manner of being, manière d'être, and not the Aristotelian articulation of the essence of being. Leibniz, he says, goes a step further, un pas au-delà, in noting that perception of the world, le monde, occurs as it emerges from its somber background, this lovely term he uses that in fact we use when we read it at Oxford, the fuscum sub nigrum. And now setting this view, we use this for cinema as well, and there's nothing more cinematic than the moment, but that's another topic. So settling this view against Descartes, for whom bathed in light, causes and effects must be optically clear and distinct, Deleuze calls Leibniz's thinking, quote, a profound mannerism, unquote, whose basis is fluid and spontaneous. Its effects part of this dark background, attesting to a penchant for passages of beings, things and concepts behind every kind of mobile enclosure. Now, to show how the event is related to this manner, Deleuze cites Leibniz's dog. Here's, this is for Catherine, because we share, I think, so we share the same affection. Deleuze cites Leibniz's dog on the verge of being whipped when it eats its soup, and the infant Caesar suckling when bitten by a wasp. So there's the French, and so I'll read the French, and then maybe in order to economize, we can just sight read the translation. So here's the French. Peut-on dire qu'une douleur est spontanée dans l'âme du chien qui reçoit un coup de bâton pendant qu'il mange sa soupe, ou dans celle de César enfant qui se fait piquer par une guêpe pendant qu'il tète? Wonderful moment being being stung by the suckling. Terrific. Il faut restituer les séries au lieu de s'en tenir à des abstraits. Le mouvement du bâton ne commence pas avec le coup. Un homme s'est approché par derrière, portant le bâton, puis l'a levé pour la battre enfin sur le corps du chien. Ce mouvement complexe a une unité intérieure, tout comme dans l'âme du chien, le changement complexe a une unité active. La douleur n'a pas brusquement succédé au plaisir, mais a été préparée par 1000 petites perceptions 1,000 tiny perceptions, le bruit des pas, l'odeur de l'homme hostile, l'impression du bâton qui se lève, bref, toute une inquiétude insensible où la douleur va sortir soi, spontanée, comme par une force naturelle intégrant les modifications précédentes. So, although not named as such, the event becomes the perception of a quasi-infinite cavalcade of perceptions, almost co-temporal and co-extensive with the infliction, all surging forth from those dark depths, where, exactly in the manner of the writing, Montaigne had ventured into les profondeurs opaques and the replis internes, those inner folds of the vaporous soul. So no doubt capturing our envy and possibly attesting to our caniphilia, the dog's extreme sentience, indeed its capacity in the philosopher's relation of the impressions taking place within its body as it perceives the master raising its whip, owes to a simultaneity of subjectivation and objectivation. It feels what is happening, at the same time it qualifies that feeling. Further on, in the 6th chapter, the barriers between the headings and numbers in Deleuze are as porous as the partitions between Montaigne's essays. Beginning under the title, What is an event? Qu'est-ce qu'un événement? Deleuze offers 2 examples before positing that a screen or webbing is required to discern these events from that fuscum sub nigrum in which they are concealed. So here's the French. I'll read the French, the English is just below. Un événement, ce n'est pas seulement un homme écrasé. La grande pyramide est un événement. Et ça durait pendant 1 heure, 30 secondes, 5 minutes. Un passage de la nature ou un passage de Dieu, une vue de Dieu. Quelles sont les conditions d'un événement pour que tout soit événement? L'événement se produit dans un chaos, dans une multiplicité chaotique, à condition qu'une sorte de triple intervienne. Now, mantling Alfred North Whitehead's reading of Leibniz and the concept of nature and its process and reality, Deleuze explains that 4 components comprise the event, including, again, it always goes by order, 1, a sense of extension, where one thing stretches onto others, yielding an infinite series of wholes and parts in a distribution that when followed becomes a vibration, such as a sound wave, a luminous wave, or else a diminution of space over a shorter and shorter period of time. And so, 2, the force of vibration turns these extensions into, quote, intentions, with an S, not a T, intensities, degrees, owing to perception of infinitesimal differences of a sound or of a tint, value, or saturation of color. That 3 belong to something individual, taken to be a site of creativity, where there is a, quote, a concrescence of elements, a swarming together, perhaps, but by all means a prehension of things and of the world. The eye is a prehension of light, while living beings prehend water, earth, carbon, and salts. Suddenly it avers that inorganic matter prehends living forms, and as shown, vice versa. Let's see if this, do I have the next one? Yeah, here it is. La pyramide, à tel moment, préhende les soldats de Bonaparte, 40 siècles vous contemplent, et réciproquement. At such moment, the pyramid prehends Bonaparte's soldiers. 40 centuries are contemplating you, and reciprocally. As it was implied in the microsecond prior to his fall from the horse, or in our sympathy for the dog's disquiet when its angry master approaches him, a surge of prehension seems at once to emanate from the environment and the psyche. What is grasped is, I quote, itself a pre-existing or coexisting prehension, unquote. As a mix or a swarm, the event is a nexus of prehensions, which are simultaneously subjectivized, that is to say, felt or interiorized in the psychic realm, and objectified, recognized, accounted for, possibly named. The prehended datum folds into the perceiver's psyche as a feeling or a manner of movement, an emotion, when it is positive, and when it's negative is thrust away in order that self-enjoyment may prevail. Now finally, 4, in their extension, intention, or intensity, and in the individual concrescence of their elements, an event is a paradoxical flux in permanence. 2 examples ensue. First, the event of a river. Now, we've had too much text here. Let's get to the images. This is a beautiful map. This is Nicolas Sanson's Carte des rivières de France, curieusement recherchée. Alors, curieusement recherchée. And it's, what makes this map so unique is that there are no place names on it, and all the river names are written in so as to form the orography, the sense of altitude. In fact, you have the writing, in effect, is giving the sense of the descent of the path. Then this other wonderful element where the strap work and frame around Carte des rivières de France is really doing a beautiful, beautiful declension of Mer de Gascogne, which is starting to space Mer de Gascogne so that it can be read in a very, very different way than one would want to, or else the fact that Mer de Gascogne, that is at the embouchure of the Gironde, is actually a word spoken at the mouth of the river. There's all kinds of latent analogy that's working in this extraordinary map, first done in 1631 and 1641. But anyway, I'm just using it to locate where, as they say in the cornfields, where Montaigne is at. So the event of the river prompts wonder about its visible aspect and how it can be imagined moving and changing in both seasonal and geological time. Secondly, la grande pyramide signifie 2 choses, un passage de la nature ou un flux qui perd et gagne des molécules à chaque moment, mais aussi un objet éternel qui demeure le même à travers les moments. The Great Pyramid signifies 2 things. A passage of nature, or a flux that loses and gains molecules at every instant, but also an eternal object remains the same through those moments. Again, I was tempted to regress into the real world here, and so this is now the highly domesticated Dordogne scene from the Chateau de Bénac, where in fact the river traffic carries a great deal of oak from the Limousin and Auvergne for the barrels that in fact are going to season the wine in the Bordelais. But anyway, that's another story. At the beginning of Des Cannibales, 131, the celebrated evocation of Ma Rivière de Dordogne seems aimed at praising the eye of a topographer whose experience of space and place offsets hazy speculations of philosophers and cosmographers whose bookish sense of the world had been based on myth or received information. So we quote, quand je considère l'impression que ma rivière de Dordogne fait de mon temps vers la rive droite de sa descente, et qu'en 20 ans, elle a tant gagné et dérobé de fondement à plusieurs bâtiments, je vois bien que c'est une agitation extraordinaire, car si elle fût toujours allée ce train, ou dût aller à l'avenir, la figure du monde serait renversée. Mais il reprend des changements. Tantôt il s'épande d'un côté, tantôt d'un autre. Now, describing how some of his brother's property near Libourne was inundated by sand the sea had vomited over its shores and beyond, and now how locals say how they've lost 12 leagues of land, Montaigne possibly turns the mascaré, a regional and seasonal phenomenon, a flux of waves thrusting up the lower Dordogne into an event bearing the very traits the philosopher enumerates, with the difference that the evocation figures in an arena where the politics of expansive colonization are in question in that essay. So what happened here, effectively, here, what today is happening at Mont Saint-Michel and along the coastline along the Bay of Biscay, not to mention the entire eastern seaboard of North America, almost 5 centuries later, may be a consequence of exactly what Montaigne had loathed. Anyway, that's just an external reflection here. So, similarly, and more famously, the pyramid. At the beginning of Du Repentir, it is a point of reference for what happens to an object when it is perceived or prehended. It acts upon the viewer or reader in what would be a mutual force of perception made manifest through the webbing of the writing. So we have here, mes lui, c'est fait, the most famous lines of the essays that Auerbach, I think, uses in My Mises. But so beautiful just to hear it. Oh, les traits de ma peinture ne fourvoient point, quoi qu'il se change et diversifie. Le monde n'est qu'une branloire pérenne. Toutes choses y branlent sans cesse. La terre, les rochers de Caucase, les pyramides d'Égypte, et du branle public et du leur. La constance même n'est autre chose qu'un branle plus languissant. Je ne puis assurer mon objet. Il va trouble et chancelant d'une ivresse naturelle. Now, if constancy is a slower or languid swagger or teeter-totter, he calls it a thing, suggests that it can be simultaneously seen and read. Now, in Montaigne's idiolect, in what he calls un dictionnaire tout à part moi, that's in 313, the Egyptian pyramids and the Caucasus Mountains, the latter very well chosen because the geological event is in the texture of their name, both as a cause and something that may happen or fall, casus, are qualified as choses, otherwise one of the palest and most insignificant nouns in the French language. It here invites reading and seeing the cause within the effect or the trapping of the word, the chose. Now the stony liquidity common to the pyramid and the mountain would be at once a collapse of cause and effect, that the inscriptive process of the essay, its writing in relation with our audio-visual perception, causes it to become a Baroque form, a concept concetto, a concrescence of vibrations, a swarm of visual, auditory, and lexical prehensions, what Deleuze defines not as attributes, but as predicate events. Now, here we are. Pyramid, river, and mountain, seen and read at once, rebounding between the graphic and sonorous form of the matter that signifies them, makes them events in their own right. Now, rather than listing crossovers and parallels between the essay and the fold, it can be asked if ever, like Montaigne's, Deleuze's writing becomes an event unto itself. Does it perform what it labors to explicate? Hardly everywhere, but maybe in a riff on Beroale, again, one of Malcolm Bowie's favorite authors. And at the first moment, an inkling of an event in that book comes forward. Now, in concert with what he had announced in the first sentence of his essay, that the Baroque is the operative condition, quote, continually making folds, unquote, he calls the poet's vocation an operation by which the fan, or the éventail, notably the circumstantial poem, L'autre éventail de Madame Mallarmé's other fan, sets in motion atmospheric and molecular convection. So here is the French, which I'll read. Oh, did I get that? No, I guess I didn't. Oh, I didn't put a translation in here. Well, I'll just go ahead. Le pli du monde, c'est l'éventail ou l'unanime pli. Et tantôt l'éventail ouvert fait descendre et monter tous les grains de matière, cendres, brouillards, à travers lesquels on perçoit le visible comme par les trous d'un voile. Si l'on les replis qui laissent voir la pierre dans les chambrures de leurs inflexions, pli selon pli, révélant la ville mais aussi bien révèle l'absence ou le retrait, conglomérat de poussière, collectivité creuse, armée et assemblée hallucinatoire. Le pli est inséparable du vent, ventilé par l'éventail. Le pli, he lapses into poetry. He lapses into poetry. Deleuze, the philosopher, suddenly turns poet here. Le pli est inséparable du vent, ventilé par l'éventail. Le pli n'est plus celui de la matière à travers lequel on voit, mais celui de l'âme, dans laquelle on lit, pli jaune de la pensée, le livre ou la monade à multiples feuillets. Translation. The world's fold is the fan or the unanimous fold. And then when the open fan causes to fall and to rise every grain of matter, ashes or fog by which the visible is perceived, as if through the holes in a veil, following the pleats that allow stone to be seen in the indentations of their inflections, fold after fold, that's a quote from Deleuze, revealing the city, but also reveals its absence or extraction, a conglomerate of dust, hollow collectivities, armies and hallucinatory assemblies. The fold is inseparable from wind, vent, ventilated by the fan, éventail. The fold is no longer that of matter through which we see, but that of the soul in which we read. Yellow folds of thought, the book B, capital B, or monad of many leaves, unquote. Now, Mallarmé's fan is the pli de l'événement, its agitation stirring the atmosphere and simultaneously, in the form of the word, seen and read polymorphously, inviting perception of the event in its form, a form that fans ventilation and dispersion of perceptions at once audible and visual. For an ever-brief moment, in their identification with Mallarmé's aboli bibelot, Deleuze's words unfold, they vaporize, and they too disperse. At the same time, better than any explication of an event, they fold upon themselves and become one. So, by way of conclusion, we can wonder why and wherefore the Baroque event and fold theory and the writing of the essays can be superimposed. Displacement of Montaigne into a context in which the Baroque is taken to describe a contemporary cultural condition alters the reception of the author in the work. We move from a niche in a pantheon of literary history and displaced into a process, into an operative function, what in Le Pli might be an event machine. The essays become events, events of the very texture that Deleuze's speculations explain so well, and on occasion embody the operations that motivate and even bring metal to the arts of our moment. Such, it is hoped, the virtue of the confluence that I've sought to make this afternoon. Thank you.